The sounds and images of Pope John Paul II's Jubilee pilgrimage to the Holy Land in March of the year 2000 remain indelibly etched in the minds of those who took part in this historic visit and those who followed closely on their television screens around the world. There was no doubt that this was a deeply moving event for Christians and Jews the world over.
We are very excited to be in Jerusalem when the Pope is there.
I think this is a great moment in history.
We want peace for all nations.
I'm really happy he came.
He's come in peace.
From the human point of view and from the religious point of view, it has been the greatest experience in my life.
While Pope John Paul II's pilgrimage to the Holy Land was an exceptional personal journey, it was also the climax of another journey which has lasted for half a century. The journey of the Catholic Church to recognition of and reconciliation with the Jewish people. Each stop on Pope John Paul's week-long visit to the Holy Land was carefully planned. To appreciate the historic significance of this pilgrimage, one must go back in history.
The history of Catholic-Jewish relations for most of our history was very negative. It was a story of persecutions and pogroms, and Jews were on the bad end of it most of the time, and particularly Middle Ages, throughout the Crusades. I think it was a pretty sad history. What happened in this century post-Holocaust is rather remarkable. If I had to summarize the changes between Catholics and Jews, I would say we've moved from persecution to partnership, from confrontation to cooperation.
This is a story of self-examination and soul-searching. While Pope John Paul II's visit is the most well-publicized example of this change in our day, the journey began with Pope John XXIII, known by his actions as the Good Pope. It was Pope John XXIII who set in motion the monumental shift in attitudes toward the Jewish people and the Jewish faith. His wartime experiences influenced his later actions. Serving as papal nuncio in Turkey during the Second World War, Monsignor Roncalli was involved in the rescue of thousands of Jews from extermination by the Nazis. When Roncalli succeeded Pope Pius XII in 1958, he became known as Pope John XXIII. During his term, he initiated a revolution in the Catholic Church. In 1962, 8,000 Catholic bishops from around the globe were called together to discuss issues of relevance to the Church in facing the modern world. This would be called the Second Vatican Council, and part of its task was to reassess the attitude of the Church toward non-Christian religions.
One of the great graces of my life was to have been a participant as an advisor present at the Second Vatican Ecumenical Council. And I will never forget the day when, and it was in 1963, when Cardinal Augustin Bea came before the council to present what evolved in time into the document called Nostra Aetate, in our day, on the relationship between the Catholic Church and non-Christian religions.
In Nostra Aetate, the rethinking about Judaism was specifically articulated. It was here that the foundations of recognition and reconciliation were laid. A fateful meeting between Pope John XXIII and the famous French Jewish historian Jules Isaac had a great impact on the Pope.
Pope John XXIII, as he was preparing for the Second Vatican Council, expressly invited the great French Jewish historian Jules Isaac to the Vatican. Said, I want to know what are you looking for? How can we help? We're going to be engaging the modern world in the Second Vatican Council. And Jules Isaac was prepared, as a good historian, with a whole list of things which have since become known as the teaching of contempt. how Christians have taught about the Jews and Judaism, and he presented them in this list, and Pope John the 23rd looked at the list and studied it. He said, you can expect more than a little from us.
Over our history as Christians, we've never been able to speak of ourselves without speaking about Judaism, because it's from Judaism that we came. But unfortunately, really tragically, we see now in retrospect that those early years when we were trying to develop our own identity, that there was this teaching about the other that always reduced the other to something less than we were. In the Middle Ages, that was shown particularly, because in the Middle Ages most people were not literate, at least in any sense that we have it today. So that was shown by way of comparison, contrast in various modes of art. Two of the most famous figures from the Middle Ages are these two figures, two women, of the church and the synagogue, synagoga and ecclesia. But the most famous, I suppose, would be in the Cathedral of Strasbourg, France. And there, the church is always presented as a woman who is elegant and upright, queenly, I would say, representing the triumph of the risen Christ. In contrast, the woman who is representative of the synagogue, of the people of Israel, is shown as beaten down, as defeated. The crown is falling off her head, the staff is broken, and so forth. And clearly then, for people in the Middle Ages, when they viewed those sculptures, they knew exactly where the church stood in relationship to Judaism. So it's a visualization of the teaching of contempt.
The meeting between Pope John the 23rd and Jules Isaac set the stage for the formal changes which were to come out of the Second Vatican Council regarding relations toward Judaism and the Jewish people. Hints of the changing tides can be recognized at another encounter that took place between Pope John the 23rd and a delegation of American Jews on the eve of the Second Vatican Council.
He came in the midst of the usual Vatican decorum and regality. He came into the room and he said, "I am Joseph, your brother." And from that moment, I think we can see the beginning of a trajectory that I think has gone straight through the pontificates of John the 23rd, Paul VI, and Pope John Paul II.
Welcoming the Jewish delegation with the phrase, "I am Joseph, your brother," was particularly apt, because Pope John the 23rd's given name was Giuseppe, Joseph in Italian. By using the biblical story of Joseph as a metaphor, the Pope established a familial bond with the Jewish delegation that would help to open the new chapter in Catholic-Jewish relations. No longer were Jews to be seen as the killers of Jesus, but rather, Jews and Christians were to be seen now as family, as brothers and sisters.
Joseph's story is, actually it's one of my favorite stories. Joseph, the alienated brother, alienated from his own brothers who were very cruel to him. They sold him into slavery and he went into Egypt. When the brothers and the father were suffering from a famine, they heard that there was food in Egypt, so they sent them down to Egypt, and apparently Joseph recognized his brothers.
Sometimes Joseph is registering surprise when he is confronting his brothers. Sometimes he is saying, "I am Joseph, your brother," in a consoling way. But I find it to be a wonderful description of one of our faith groups saying to the other, interchangeably, that we are brothers.
And so finally, near the end of the story, Joseph says, "I'm Joseph, your brother." And so there's the moment of great reconciliation.
The declaration in Nostra Aetate regarding the Jews is a formal articulation of this familial bond. In effect, Nostra Aetate dramatically changed the relationship of the Catholic Church to the Jewish people.
The Church of Christ acknowledges that according to God's saving design, the beginnings of her faith and her election are found already among